Greetings and salutations. You are listening to the Into the North podcast, where we take a look at the competitive side of the Commander format, also known as CEDH. I am one of your hosts, Lyndon, aka Noobzors, and today I am joined by my co-hosts, Matt, aka Null.
Hello, everyone.
Reed, aka Sick Robot.
What is up?
And Morgan, aka Spleenface.
How's it going?
In this episode, we're going to be covering learning a new deck and the tips and tricks to help you, make that a smooth transition, get proficient with a new deck as fast as possible, and some of the challenges that can occur. And without further ado, let's get into housekeeping. And our only element of housekeeping in the show notes today is our we've got a new patron,
which is a very big element of housekeeping.
I mean, these are our main housekeeping elements.
Yes.
Big shout out to Peter E. For becoming a new patron. Thanks for your support. We appreciate it. So let's go into new developments. In new developments, we've got the Time Twisted tournament. Morgan, do you want to talk about this a bit? Because you did some stuff with it.
Yes. So the Time Twisted tournament is a paper CDH tournament over webcam. I believe it's being run on the 7th and 8th of December.
We will be linking that stuff. So.
Yeah, we'll be linking. There's a Discord. It's being run on the 7th and 8th of December. There's a $20 entry fee, but there are some pretty incredible prizes on the line.
What do they call this? It's like Battle of the Duels is like the subtitle for their tournament, because
it's something like that. Because I believe there is a tropical island, a scrubland, and a badlands. That I'm not sure on that last one, but there are 3 original duels on the line, as well as some other awesome prizes. They do a playmat for the winner. This is the 3rd Time Twisted tournament. The last one, first place got a Mox Diamond, and second place got, I think, a Badlands.
Yeah.
And I didn't participate, but I was commentating in that one, and that was a ton of fun.
I did participate. I got a revised Demonic Tutor, and I had a 1-3 record or something like that.
That's pretty good.
It was BS the way I got into pricing, but
apparently they're going to have new and improved tournament software this time. And it's run by the Mystic Remores, who are some pretty cool people who stream CDH on Fridays.
Pretty
so
cool
should be a ton of fun. As many of us as don't have exams or something are going to enter.
I mean, maybe even if some of us do have exams, might still need to enter.
Yeah, I mean,
when there's think about it. What's
the expected value of increasing a letter grade on your exam versus the expected value of a tropical island?
I mean, honestly, right? If you're still getting the degree at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, D's get degrees.
Would you rather have a trop at the end of the day or a slightly higher letter on a piece of
paper? Stay in school.
I've been told letters are important, though.
Letters are pretty important.
So that's the Time Twisted tournament, and our other new development is Team Turn 3 is back in a surprising new form. Reed, you want to talk about this one?
Sure. So as you who have been in the community for a while might know, or have looked for paper CDH content, Team Turn 3 used to be a powerhouse. They had a lot of good content out, but have been on hiatus for a while now, but it's back. Pongo from Team Turn 3 has basically put together a stream dream team, and has sort of pivoted Team Turn 3 into being, for the time being, basically a streaming group, with posts of said streams as VODs for YouTube for people to check out. And has put together an absolute banger of a team to do streams, including the Into North squad, us, hi. We got some of the Spike Feeders on there. We have
Shaper Savant,
Scotty from Scotty Knows Gaming, Lurker, just a whole bunch of greatest hits from the CDH community, honestly. So,
and 70% Canadian.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, so I'm sure people who are listening to this podcast are also interested in CDH video content, as I'm sure many people in the community are, because you can never have enough video content. So if you want to check it out, you should, because some of us are going to be on those streams sometimes, a lot of the time, probably. So if you want to see us actually play games, like a lot of you have actually asked for before, you can now actually check us out on Team Turn 3. I believe our current schedule is we are doing Sunday
Sundays,
streams at
7 p.m. Eastern.
Yes, 7 p.m. Eastern on twitch.tv/Team Turn 3, I
or
boulieve.
TT3.
It's
or
the one.
something
We
like
will link
Yes.
that
Yeah.
in the
We'll
description.
link all of it in the
that. At
description.
HTTP.
But yeah,
/
I'm really excited for this because I think it's great to get everybody together on a stream like that officially, because people hop in between other people's streams and sort of get to meet up for games every once in a while, but to actually have like a dedicated channel for everybody to be like, yeah, let's jam games.
And soon
It's gonna be awesome.
we're going to be approaching the point where we're going to have CDH streams going every single night of the week.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah, there's
Dude, if you had told me about that like a year ago, I would have never believed you.
yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. So let's get into the episode. So, again, the topic, learning a new deck. Any of you guys want to kick things off with our first little subtopic here?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
God, I was waiting. I was like, Morgan. All right, Morgan's gonna take this. All right, I guess not. Okay. So specifically, before we get into the the process of picking up a new deck and learning it and being good with it and all that stuff, I think we wanted to start off with just a general question. If you're looking at picking up a new deck, which is, why are you picking up that new deck? And I think it's important that you actually think about that question when you're looking at not even necessarily like buying into the new deck, but like proxying it up and bringing it to a local play group or whatever, or seriously looking at picking it up and getting good with it. It's just a good idea to like look at the deck that you're picking up and be like, why am I looking to play this? What are my reasons behind it?
Because that certainly helps inform whether or not it's a good decision to pick up that particular deck.
And even like
yeah.
it can help inform like the amount of time that you're willing to spend on it, and or like some of the decisions later on in the line when you're like learning the deck and still picking it up. Just because like there's like, I want to make it clear that it's okay for the reason for you to pick up a deck to be, I want to play a new deck and this one looked like fun. Like it's not
that's
like
half the reason why I pick up new decks. So.
exactly. It's not like it has to be like, oh, I'm looking for something to bust this very specific meta and I need to pick up this new deck and this like looked like the best statistical option for that meta. Like that can be a reason, but like it can also be the reason of, yeah, I want a new fun deck and this looked like fun. But I do think it's important to think about that and make sure that like you actually have that in your mind.
Not picking a TNT deck because you don't want to be part of the problem.
Oh my gosh.
Make sure that you're not picking a deck that your friends play, so you're not a deck thief. You know, although in case your friends call dibs on a deck first, you know.
Picking up a specific deck is extremely low stakes. You seem to have converged on all these high stake decisions, but honestly, yeah, if it looks fun, that's a good enough reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that might be a little qualifier in terms of maybe you shouldn't pick up a particular deck is that it doesn't fit well into your meta, because you're just not going to have a good time trying to pilot a deck if you're like, wow, you know, I'm going to play this Anafenza deck that I saw from Noobzors online because, you know, it's so cool. And then
I mean, there are lots of reasons not to play that deck.
And then you play it into your meta and you're like, wow, there's no grave hate. My commander basically does nothing. Why am I playing this deck?
Maybe don't play a creatureless deck into a Tymna meta.
Yeah.
Also, honestly, when you pick a deck that doesn't fit into a meta and then you try to test it out, it also can taint your experience with the deck and like taint how you look at it, because you pick it up and play it into a meta game that it's not suited for, and you're like, wow, this is a terrible deck. Why would everybody ever play this? This is so bad. And it just like taints your experience with the deck moving forward, and like you never really look at it the same,
gonna
right?
go online and complain to everyone how this deck is like tier 5 garbage.
And whenever anybody mentions it on Reddit, you just go right there. You're like, nope, this is a terrible deck. You should play something else. It's not worth it.
But I mean, I think it's important. You probably don't want to pick a deck that's terrible into your meta. Like, you should try and avoid that. But honestly, picking a deck because it sounds fun is probably a better reason to pick a deck than picking a deck that seems really good into your meta.
I agree.
Like you can try and meta bust, that's fine, or you can, pick something that works reasonably well. But if you're just picking, like, Anafenza, the best example, if you're going like, I'm going to play Anafenza because everyone's on Hulk, like, first of all, if people switch decks, then you have to switch again because you've picked a deck for, one reason. And if it's not really the playstyle you enjoy, even if you're winning more just because it's so well situated, you're not gonna be like loving it. So, well, yes, obviously don't pick decks into metas that you'll just get trounced in because you won't have a good time. I think you'll have a better time if you pick a deck that's fine in your meta, but you enjoy playing or how it works or something, than if you pick a deck that you don't really enjoy but is really good in your meta.
And it also goes a bit further to say, like, it's a lot easier to become good with the deck, and it's a better time in general if you're going to enjoy playing the deck. Like, it's going to take you a longer time, and it's going to be harder and more frustrating to learn a deck if you don't enjoy playing it, and if you didn't enjoy it when you pick the deck up.
Yeah, beyond just learning a deck, becoming proficient with the deck, you can import that meme from the 10,000 hours to become an expert or whatever. You don't need 10,000 hours, I would say, to become an expert in a particular deck, but you do need to play quite a few games, and you're just not going to get to that, or at least it's going to be very unenjoyable to get to that level of experience of piloting a deck if you don't enjoy what you're doing. So yeah, pick something you think is interesting, you're going to enjoy playing for a few games if you're going to try to just pick it up and then become proficient. Okay, well, now that we've kind of elucidated reasons why and why not to pick a particular deck.
Now that we've made you eat your vegetables.
Yeah, now assuming you've chosen your deck, what do you do to actually learn it? So I think first things first, go to the CEDH decklist database and find resources that exist for that deck. So the CEDH decklist database is great because it has links to all the primers and discords for particular decks. So
we try to keep that updated too, so you're generally going to be able to find what you're looking for if you're looking for an established deck.
That being said, too, the database also kind of helps you choose decks because it like categorizes them by particular like play styles, and also like you can click on the primer links, and most primers have like a motivation section as well.
Yeah, so you can help if you're shopping around for a list and you don't necessarily know what you exactly want to play yet, but you like have your motivation behind it. It can also help just to look at lists and check out their sections on like, hey, what's the motivation for playing this one? As Matt said, basically.
Also, one thing too is people, from my experience, tend to just go to a pick a deck list, then go to the particular Discord, and then ask for advice on learning the deck. I think that you can also just go to a Discord if you're for a deck you're interested and be like, sell me on this deck. I'm sure there's lots of people. I know if someone did on the GitRock Discord, they'd get tons of responses. But yeah, just having people on the Discords are generally pretty enthusiastic about their deck, so they're going to make the most convincing case for it. So yeah, that's what you need to push yourself.
That's honestly something that I don't actually see that much. I think that people should actually probably do more. Is just go to deck servers that they haven't actually picked up yet, and like just ask around, look around, check stuff out, because tends to be like people will pick up the deck and be like, oh, okay, I've decided that I want to play this, and then go to the Discord, or then look at like, you know, resources after that.
Yep. Okay, so you've chosen your deck. You've gone to the CDH decklist database. Although,
or the Commander Library Discord server is another great way of finding primers and Discords.
Specifically for more
it's
overarching Discords, and for Discords that like don't pertain to one specific deck, it's pretty great.
One thing I will say though is that if you're trying to pick up an established deck, these are perfect resources for this, right? Because it's a fairly comprehensive list of established decks. But if you want to, let's say you see a discussion on Reddit or on, you know, particular like the CDH Discord in their brewing channel, you're like, oh, people are brewing around this, but there's not really an established list for it. You're going to have some trouble finding some stuff on the deck list database. So if there's no resources available, you're going to kind of have to go through a separate path, and we can discuss that in a bit. But this is primarily for if you've chosen an established deck list.
Yes.
Well said.
And also, I don't think we specifically mentioned this yet, but along with all of those things, like going to check out the Discord and whatever, pretty much always when you're looking to pick up a deck, read the primer, if there is one. Because it, like, honestly, I get that you don't want to read about a deck before you do stuff with you. Like, you want to look at the cards and be like, yeah, this looks fun, and then go play the deck. And you don't want to, you don't want there to be any reading in between those two parts. But honestly, primers tend to be very, very well maintained. And if they're not, they still answer a lot of questions that you might have about the deck.
Yeah, especially before you go on the Discord and you like start asking some really basic questions about the deck. Many times people will just be like, read the primer.
Yeah, I don't have that many primers, but it's definitely very frustrating to get repeatedly asked questions that are like just directly answered in the primer. But one thing that I genuinely enjoy is getting asked questions about stuff that's in the primer. Like, it makes me think about, you know, the deck, and it promotes discussion, and it shows that the person asking the question was actually like willing to look in and try and learn, rather than sort of just asking, you know, hey, could you think for me, please?
Yeah.
So pretty much what we're saying is eat your vegetables and do your homework.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Basically.
So now that you've read the primer, picked your deck on the deck list database or Commander Library, gone to the Discord server, introduced yourself, said hello. What are you going to do next?
Well, something that I like to do when I pick up a new deck, personally. Honestly, it's like I guess it's sort of obvious, and you're probably going to do this intuitively anyway, but I do like to think about stuff that might just be like intuitive and you would just do anyway, because I think it's sort of productive to like conceptualize why you were doing that thing and like actively think about what you're doing. But what I like to do is just think about other decks that are similar to the one that I'm picking up that I might have played before. Say I'm picking up any other Hulk deck, I go, oh hey, I've played a couple of Hulk decks, and like, oh hey, I've played a couple of Hulk decks that like might have similar commanders to this one, or like might have similar strategies or whatever else like that, and then try to use those previous experiences with decks and maybe try to apply parts of that. Maybe it doesn't completely fit in the same mold, but you can just be like, okay, well, like I get the general concept behind this, or I have some. Yeah, I have some tricks and stuff from my previous experiences with similar decks that I might be able to bring over to this one.
Yeah, I think this personally affects me. I think this personally affects me most when I switch archetypes, and like I'll just kind of forget the small things and maybe put myself a couple turns behind and just think about, I guess, like exactly what you're trying to accomplish with the game plan because if you kind of confuse like a different deck's game plan, you'll forget things. And
Yeah, especially like the eternal question in all of Magic of, am I the beatdown? Right? But like that can be a very difficult question to answer, especially in something like CDH where there are 4 people and you're all varying degrees of being the beatdown. But having experience with a previous deck that might fit the archetype a bit or can give you context can go a long way toward helping you answer that question.
All right.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that when you're switching archetypes is also when, like, think about what it is that makes your archetype different from whatever it was you were playing before, because certain habits that you develop, like as an example, decks with 1 CMC green dorks maybe have certain play patterns where like you really want to develop them on turn 1. You know, if you opened with like Llanowar Elves and Ponder, you'd almost always want to play the Llanowar Elf, but that might not be as true with other 1 CMC plays that you have in some deck that doesn't run green dorks.
Yeah, and then you're at that point you're a full turn behind, right? Because you have to wait a whole turn to get your mana working.
But that way, in sort of in that sense as well, there can be, say you're really used to playing green dorks and you are very used to the concept of, oh, I have this 1 green mana thing in my hand, I'm going to play it on turn 1. It doesn't really matter what else I have in my hand, I'm going to play this on turn 1. Sometimes it's useful to look at, well, how much mana does this deck actually need on average, right? Because there are a lot of decks now, especially Flash Hulk decks, or other things of the sort, where even though you're playing dorks in the deck, you might not actually need all of the mana that they provide, and it might be more productive to do something else. So it's just like making that consideration of, okay, let me question my pre-existing play patterns that I might have associated with some of these cards, and see if they still fit in the new deck that I'm looking at.
Yeah, and kind of piggybacking off the play patterns and things from old decks and how it works into the new deck. One thing that's kind of important is that you can carry over some of that, your bias from previous decks, when and you might be eager to be like, you know, this isn't the cards that I'm seeing in this deck or that I'm playing, they're just not working out appropriately. You know, you're playing them a certain way, but it's just not working. You think, oh, this is just inefficient deck design. You know, I'm going to make some tweaks. But a lot of the deck lists you're going to find on the deck list database have been tuned by multiple players for a long time. So is it something that you're noticing that everyone just missed? Maybe. But also maybe is that you're just missing something that it takes more experience to kind of realize.
Yeah, it doesn't never happen that you see something that everyone else missed, but you know, it's like they laugh at fools and they laugh at geniuses, but most of the people being laughed at aren't geniuses.
Yeah, so it's a pretty good piece of advice is to just play the stock list for multiple games, like not just, you know, 1 or 2 games, make some tweaks. I think it's probably wise to just jam a stock list for, you know, 10 plus games before you decide to make any changes. It just helps establish a solid baseline and gives it enough time for the deck to kind of show what it's trying to do. Also, I would not just personally make any changes without, you know, consulting the deck list server first, because people will generally have opinions. Sometimes it could happen that, you know, let's say someone picks up Gitrog for the first time and they're like playing Chains of Mephistopheles and they're like, yeah, God, you know, I've played this card, I've played this deck, you know, 10 times, but every time I play Chains, you know, nothing is just not working right for me. I'm maintaining card disadvantage, or I'm not getting card advantage. I'm not breaking parity well on it. What's even the point of this in the deck? You go on the Gitrog server, and they're like, yeah, well, Chained is actually a really important discard outlet in case there's a Curse Totem or Linvala, and those kinds of niche scenarios are something that might not happen in your 10 games or in your specific meta. They can also say, oh, you're supposed to break parity on Chains of Mephistopheles by using dredge cards. Oh, okay, I didn't realize that.
And particularly, when you have a deck that you're not super experienced with and it seems like a card isn't performing, just certainly keep in mind the possibility that you're not using it right or you're approaching it the wrong way, as opposed to, wow, I haven't, oh, this card isn't performing, I'm going to try swapping it out.
Yeah.
It's very easy to think of a card as doing one thing when it's actually in there for a different reason.
Or potentially
Narset's Reversal is a big one.
Yes. But also potentially
sometimes it's not just an additional, quote unquote counter spell. Sometimes it's necessary for combos.
You actually just need it in the deck.
Yeah.
But also sometimes it maybe not, it might not be that you're playing the card incorrectly, but it might be that the game situation, or the situations rather, that the card is in the deck to help you play through, or the situations that it's in the deck for basically just aren't coming up in your testing games. And it's good to realize sometimes that the cards that are in the deck that you're just like, these don't seem like great choices, might be choices that are better in general, but might not be performing specifically for you. And it's good to ask around and be like, hey, why is this card in the deck, rather than just writing it off as bad? Because a lot of the time people will write off cards as bad if they're not performing for them, when that might be true that they're bad in that situation specifically, but not in general. And it's good to know the reasons behind cards being in the deck.
And don't
before
forget
making the
that
swaps.
Before you ask a question, always consult your primer, because there are definitely sections, single card discussion sections in primers, and there are also meta consideration sections. So
yeah, knowing in the primers, kind of what Matt was saying, meta considerations, they will help you. They'll often list kind of the flex slots in the deck. So, in Gitrog, for instance, Grafdigger's Cage, Natural State are some flex slots. If you're not seeing, if people aren't jamming Rest in Peace, Curse Totem into your meta, and you don't need to, and there's no ISO Rev or Food Chain or something, right? Natural State, probably not the best. If it's more of a creature-based Staxy meta, something like that, swap that out for something more appropriate. And there's usually in primers appropriate swaps for those specific cards, or general meta-specific tuning cards. But you can also just ask on the server. So, oh, this is my meta. What do I need for this kind of what kind of swap would be ideal here? And sometimes meta specific hate makes it into the base list, which I think the biggest example of is Grafdigger's Cage, because lots of deck builders kind of assume a really Hulk heavy meta.
Or just assume that people are have any amount of Hulk in their meta, right?
Yeah. And that assumption might not hold true for your case. So, yeah, always consult the primer for flex slots, meta swaps, and ask on the servers.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, and the last bit of advice we have for introducing yourself and picking up and learning a new deck is how to practice, how to maximize. So we did mention, playing multiple games before, making tweaks yourself, and before you would typically be considered proficient enough to make these kinds of calls. But in these kinds of games, if you're just trying to improve your skill and proficiency and knowledge with a particular deck, there is some techniques you can do to maximize the benefits of your practice games. So, Reed, you wanna jump into this one?
Yeah, sure. So sort of adjacent to practice games is something that, I mean, I like to do, and I find it helps me pick up decks faster if I'm doing it. But in addition to doing practice games, if you're picking up a proactive deck, so something that is looking to actually execute its game plan fairly consistently, and you're not like going to be sitting there holding up interaction or slamming down sax pieces or something like that, is just to do like goldfishing with the deck, basically. Basically just like drawing hands and playing them out. Because when you're picking up like a new deck that's proactive but might have a different game plan or a different way of getting to the win than decks you've played before, it can be really good just to like give yourself 7 cards at random and then try to work out a win from those 7 cards and figure out like, hey, okay, what's, because in like a practice game, you might not be fully paying attention to what's in your hand or like what you're going to do in the next 3 turns to win. You're just sort of looking there like, okay, what am I doing this turn? What might they have in their hand? Like thinking about like the other people at the table and all that stuff. And I find that sort of focusing on, okay, so in the next 3 turns, what can I do to get to the win from this hand can be really, like, it can be a nice mental exercise in getting you sort of thinking about how the deck works and thinking ahead in your game plan for the deck, which can be really nice for applying later on in actual games.
Yeah, and then in the actual, that was a good sidebar on goldfishing and whatnot, but in the actual game, when you're, what sorts of things should you be paying attention to about a deck? Like what sorts of questions should you be asking yourself, and kind of taking away from the actual game? Because sometimes, like, you can just mindlessly jam games and you will get better. Like your brain, you are subconsciously learning, you know. But if you want to kind of expedite that and you know, focus and basically you can be like well read, right? Or you can do book report kind of situations and really analyze what was going on.
Dude,
so how do you analyze your games?
I don't know what you're talking about, but I play all my games in autopilot, and look how easy it is to get good at the game that way.
Yeah, if you jam
I think
hundreds of games, geez.
I think one of the biggest things that people focus on is they look in the wrong places for mistakes. Like you try and go off and you're executing your combo and then you mess it up, and you know, it could be something where you just got the wrong card. It could have been something like, oh, I actually couldn't go off from here because, you know, I didn't have this piece and so I didn't have the mana to do whatever. And like, it's reasonably easy, you know, when you have the primer open in front of you and the game state that you had and you're thinking about it to be like, oh, right, if I'd done X, Y, or Z, it would have been better. But I think the biggest place for mistakes is actually a lot earlier for that. It's, you know, I sometimes use the term like the first tutor.
This is a really good point.
It's like when, you know, let's say you cast a demonic tutor on turn 3 and you're holding up interaction and you're not even necessarily planning on winning the next turn, but you're like, okay, now I'm going to try, like, I'm going to, you know, this tutor is one it's not trying to get me out of a deficit. It's like, this is going to give me some big advantage. You know, which line did you go for? You know, which combo piece did you find? Or did you actually just go for like a value engine, something like that? You know, why did you find that piece? Why were you going for that combo? You know, would it have been better if you'd found, you know, maybe some other combo that's a little bit harder to pull off, but if you got wheeled, it was less bad, or something like that, where it's not the finding the line in the turn where you win that's the place where you make a lot of mistakes. It's the few turns before that where you decided that was the line you were going for.
Yeah, so some
and
good
how
examples.
You came to that decision.
Some good examples would be in Food Chain. You know, are you spending your demonic tutor to find a food chain and just sit with it in hand? You know, because sometimes, you know, if people will launch, if you're in a pod with a non-blue player, they might launch some hand attack. You know, you Food Chain player just cast a tutor. Maybe I can, you know, snag something out of their hand. Oh, wow, Food Chain. Now you're just so behind. Instead of if you had found something like a Tainted Pact or a Consult, you're keeping your food chain in a place where it's much safer, which is in your deck, but also you're allowing yourself to get that additional value from it in terms of hitting the cast from exile creatures, or in a pinch, you can use it to go find like a counterspell or piece of interaction and whatnot. In Gitrog, a common mistake that new players make is with Entomb. Many players will sit on Entomb until they're ready to combo off. They'll get Gitrog in play, discard Outlet, and then they'll cast Entomb to go and find Dakmor. When more experienced pilots will be spending their first, they'll cast like Entomb turn 1 to go find a Life from the Loam, because you're going to be slowly. It gives you a nice bit of resiliency in terms of, it's just getting, if your Loam gets countered, they're not gonna. It's like, unless it's delay or force of negation. Yeah. those are the feels bad.
Oh my god, I cannot express how good it feels to target a Life from the Loam with the delay.
Yeah, but so aside from those specific counterspells, you're fine. People aren't going to be countering your Loam, so it's a solid piece of it's a solid value engine that you can be hitting every single turn, hitting your land drops, setting up for Gitrog, and eventually, by the time you've got, it can help you set up for the cleanup step sculpt, or it can, even just when you get Gitrog plus discard Outlet, and you have like Loam plus 3 lands in hand, you can just do your like dredge tutoring to find Dakmor. So these kinds of things that might not seem as like, wow, you're really setting up for the win very early on by finding a Life from the Loam, but it leaves you open for these kinds of plays. And along those lines as well, in some decks, when people pick up Zur or Kess, one thing they'll do is they'll rely on their commander too much. They'll be like, okay, I'm gonna hit land drop turn 1, turn 2 land drop Signet, turn 3 land drop tap out for my commander. Most decks and experienced pilots don't recommend those kinds of plays, because you might need to be holding up mana, or you want to. It's actually pretty important that your commander sits around, so you want to have your commander plus a counterspell or something. Whereas I'm sure Reed can speak to this. Lots of TNT players I see not utilizing their commanders enough. They get too focused on their win con instead of on the grind. These kinds of balancing acts are, like Morgan was saying, you can win or lose the game much earlier on. So you really need to be analyzing, should I have cast this spell at this time, even if it's not directly related to your win?
And honestly, like that was actually, I think, a pretty good example for tying back to something that we mentioned before, where the whole thing about like a lot of times, like things like 4-mana commanders that have a high impact on the game, you don't necessarily want to tap out for early when, like, the first time that you can.
Target.
Right? So that, but also maybe like they don't have as much of an impact as they could if, like, say you were playing Kess and you had an extra turn to spend like a tutor and a cantrip, and then next turn when you play Kess, you have a stocked graveyard to immediately go to, rather than like having her sit on the board and now, oh, well, I don't know if I can do all this stuff in this turn, or like, oh, I'm going to cast like my cantrip out of the bin to go find something, right? But also like the whole thing about reviewing and sort of making sure to look at your past biases from decks that you've played, where these are things that you would see out of, say, a TNT player switching to Kess or Zur and probably being more likely to tap out for their commander early because it's just something they're used to, versus maybe a Kess or Zur pilot switching to TNT where they're more reluctant to cast their commander because they have the past experience with, well, I don't necessarily want to tap out for this right now. Where it's important to look back and be like, well, what play patterns might I have, what bias might I be bringing over from a previous deck that might not fit with the way that this deck works or this strategy works.
Yeah, I played a game the other day against a TNT pilot, and he cast the Tymna, he got in once or twice, and then everyone could block the Tymna, and he was passing with like at least 5 or 6 mana open for several turns in a row, and he just never cast Thrasios. I was like, what? I don't know why you're... like, I was worried. I'm like, he's going to figure out he's going to cast Thrasios, He's going to be activating it like at least once a turn cycle, possibly twice, and then like we just can't win if that goes on too long. And he just didn't cast it, and I was like, what?
And yeah, like it's
So like that, if you're coming from food chain first sliver, you're like, well, I mean, why would I cast my commander? It doesn't, or like, that's
that kind
you,
of yeah.
you don't think of your commander as like, oh yeah, I'll just cast this as like a value engine. You think of your commander as like, I'll cast this because I have literally nothing else to do.
Yeah, and it's not like, well, it actually might be better to cast my commander now rather than even like using this tutor in my hand, because like, well, commander's low variance. It's low opportunity cost. I can just jam it and then maybe cast tutor later on.
I think as a general piece of advice, like to try to summarize like the past 10 minutes of conversation, it's hard to win when everyone is even on advantage, and whatever metric for advantage you want to consider, like card advantage, it's pretty hard to win when everyone's even. So if you're going for your first tutor, maybe think about trying to create an imbalance in card, an advantage. Pick a card that will provide you the advantage, and then if you already have the advantage, then you're great to tutor for your win conditions.
So what you're saying is always find Flash, because that card is the
Always
most
fun,
imbalanced.
dude. I love tutoring for
But
Flash.
winning the game is infinite.
I
card
I love tutoring for Flash with no Hulk in hand, and then just making people terrified. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and that's also, Matt used card advantage as an example, and that's probably the most common form of advantage, but something like that play of finding Flash,
Yeah,
that's a mana advantage. Basically, you've taxed your opponents because now they feel they have to respect the Flash. So yeah, just building on
yeah. I feel like
Matt's point.
rather than tutor for
Certainly.
Flash, maybe just tutor for Remora.
Yeah.
Hey, you shush.
Yeah. I feel like people don't tutor for Remora or Sylvan Library enough. I find myself like my early Vamp tutors or Imperial Seals when I'm playing Gitrog. I'm like, yep, Sylvan Library seems pretty good.
Yeah, or Carpet. Depending
Go
on
grab this
what's,
one.
Yeah.
Early carpets are great. So actually something that I did want to, like as another example, because I think this one is a fairly easy one to get about that kind of thing, about like, well, maybe you tutored for the wrong thing earlier on, and now like you not being able to win the game is basically a direct result of that rather than your play during that turn, is something like, and I personally think this is like an easy one to sort of get intuitively, but say you're on like Urza, and like you have an Urza on the board, and I have like, I don't know, maybe I have a Fabricate in hand, right? And I'm thinking about what I'm getting with this Fabricate. And a new pilot might be like, well, this is an Isochron reversal deck, so I think I'm going to go get Isochron Scepter with this, and then maybe I can piece together a win the turn after that. And then they maybe find the reversal somehow, and they try to go for it, but then they get stuffed, and somebody just has the counter magic, and they have to expend the counter magic on it there, because they're just like, well, you're obviously going to win the game, so I'm going to stop you here. Whereas maybe if you had fabricated for something like a Winter Orb instead, and you like had thought a bit more about, maybe I don't have to go directly for my win condition right now, and I can sort of play with some other card advantage engines or something that a new player to the deck might not see as a win condition, but realistically is. Go for that instead and be like, okay, I'm going to find a Winter Orb instead, and then I'll jam it this turn when people can't stop me, as opposed to like having it in hand and then having to wait for a later turn.
Yeah.
And I think the one last thing with tutors is that that there are many situations where the correct tutor target is nothing, because it's the wrong time to cast it. Like you think, oh, I have the mana, I'll just spend it, so that like mana and mana efficiency is important. But let's say your deck has several not super overlapping A plus B combos. If you tutor for half of one of them and then draw half of another one, like you've essentially, you can't win. But if you had held the tutor, yes, you'd be less mana efficient, but when you drew your lab man, instead of finding the Flash, you could have just found the Consult or whatever the combo happens to be. So not just making sure you're finding the right card, but also making sure it is actually right to cast the tutor.
Yeah.
Like mana mana efficiency feels like it's an easy thing. It's like, oh, well, obviously if I'm spending my mana more efficiently, that's better. And it's not that hard to do that, to like make sure you are maximizing how much mana you spend every turn. But there's a lot of points where you can commit yourself on one line, and that isn't actually the line that you want it to be on in that specific game.
Honestly, if you're practicing like consistently, just make a point of tutoring something different every time. Like, you don't really know a play is going to not work unless you try it, or unless you can like very accurately theorize the outcome. So I'd say just try to switch it up.
That's actually a great point.
Is pretty good, yeah.
Just when you're picking up a new deck, like maybe not necessarily like just being like, oh, I think like this is the absolute best thing for me to win the game with right now. But when you're picking up a new deck, just being like, well, this might be what I think is the best way to win, but I'm going to try this out and see what impact it has so I can use that later on and see like, hey, maybe this was the better tutor target in this situation.
Yeah, especially when you take advantage of the fact that you're still in that learning phase, right? I probably wouldn't take a brand new deck to something like the Time Twisted tournament when you're trying to win a tropical island, but definitely you by the time if you're like, okay, Time Twisted tournament, that's going to be in early December, I've got a few more Friday night EDH meetups that I can practice with my friends. So I'm gonna try to pick up this brand new deck. I'm gonna pick up Sacred Hulk because that seems like it's a good deck. So you want to be like Matt was saying, like experimentation is valuable, because by the time you make it to the Time Twisted tournament, if you only have ever done what you think was optimal and just doing the same kind of rote thing every time, you're not, and all of a sudden some novel situation presents itself, you might not have the expertise or familiarity with these kind of weird situations to profitably come away from that. So experiment, learn the ins and outs of the deck, learn when each tutor target is appropriate, etc., etc. With that, does anyone have anything else to add?
That sums it up for me.
Close out this topic.
Yeah, I think we're about good.
Cool. And that means it's time for everyone's favorite segment, Gut Check.
Good check.
All right.
Gut check.
So we have
gut
specific
check.
Instructions to give them first, right?
So I gave the other guys specific instructions for this gut check to have the ban list pulled up in front of them so that they can have a solid reference of cards. But the gut check question is, what card that is currently banned do you think is safe to bring into the format that would also be interesting / healthy for the current CDH meta? Is there even a card that fits this description?
Oh boy.
Yeah, so like people could
I have my answer.
Obviously, cards like Biorhythm are very safe to bring into the format because no one's going to be casting Biorhythm. But ideally, you're going to find a card that adds some play that will see play, and that's going to be healthy for the format. So let me know when you guys have your answers.
Oh, I'm good. I'm good to go.
I've had my answer, dude, for like months.
Yeah, no, we were all very quick.
Okay. So I'll lead off with mine. My answer is Gifts Ungiven. And reason being is that I think this is a card that could add some interesting build-arounds in terms of being like a one-card win condition for like Reanimator stuff. Also adds interesting stuff for Storm decks. All around an interesting card. Definitely would see play. Don't think it's that broken.
God, that's such the basic bitch answer for this.
It is a basic bitch answer. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, my answer is Leovold, and because
no!
because people are drawing too many cards,
Yes.
that has to stop. Yeah. I'm the
Morgan?
enemy here, I guess.
Reed?
I would like to also lock in Leovold as my answer
No.
No.
because I think there needs to be something to help offset Thrasios Tymna, and he's a fucking sick bug commander. Let's go, Leovold.
And what's the best offset to Leovold? Could you remind me?
Freevold.
Oh yeah,
If ever-
Leovold is the best answer to Leovold. So
That doesn't sound like a problem at all.
yeah. Morgan, your answer?
I mean, I don't want to be a basic bitch, so I think I have to say Recurring Nightmare.
Were you gonna say Gifts Ungiven?
I was torn between Gifts Ungiven and Recurring Nightmare.
Okay.
I think that Recurring Nightmare is like it's actually a reasonably efficient reanimate effect, and it's like it the fact that it's reusable enables a lot of interesting things. It's a little bit slower than straight up reanimate.
A little bit.
A little bit slower. But I think that in like more like mid-rangey decks, like more like Razakats or things like that, it provides an option that can be really, you can just use it to reanimate Razakath, obviously, but also if you're reanimating sort of slower stuff, or maybe in a deck like Blood Pod, where you can reanimate like sort of mid-tier threats without feeling like you've used a spell that you don't get back. Like if you just reanimate, I don't know, let's say Linvala, and it's not like fantastic on the board. It's just like, okay, this Linvala will be nice to
trade a
have.
dork for Linvala, or every time you're top decking some garbage dork, you can cash that in for something because Recurring Nightmare sticks around, and
yeah, but if you do that with like reanimate, then you're like, well, now if I draw a way to bin my Razaketh,
exactly.
like I actually just don't have a reanimate. But this one doesn't do that. But I will say I think that this card would be a nightmare in casual because it's
100%.
Yeah, that was actually not intentional, because it's, if you understand how the priority system works, you quickly realize that it's actually, you cannot destroy this card.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. You just can't do it. Like it's all, by the time you have a chance to cast a spell, even people go, oh well, Krosan Grip. It's like, nope.
No.
Even Krosan Grip, by the time you have a chance to cast it, Recurring Nightmare's already in their
the
hand.
return definitely should have been part of the ability, not the cost.
Well, except then you could activate it multiple times, and that also sounds like a problem.
Guess you're right. Rep.
Okay, Morgan, we'll have to do another segment sometime explaining
without us.
Leovold is so not what we want in the format.
I'm so happy that I'm on the winning team again.
I mean, I'd be fine if he was banned only as a commander, but
yeah,
yeah,
sure.
okay, fine.
But I can't. The fact that Leovold is the perfect answer to Leovold, it's just all wrong. Didn't they have a card like this in Standard a while ago? Wasn't Banestar Angel or something?
Mental Misstep was,
was
a
Mental
famous
classic.
example.
That's right. Yeah.
But we get to play Mental Misstep in our format, so obviously Leovold's good. It's good to go.
Imagine if everybody's had a Mental Misstep as signature spell, as like it was like a
oh my god,
Oathbreaker kind of thing. That's the level of degeneracy we're talking about. Okay, well, that wraps it up for Gut Check. Let's move on to listener questions. So, from Scotty of Scotty Knows Gaming, or Scotty Knows MTG, sorry. Old
I think, you know what, at this point, I think we can call him friend of the podcast, Scotty.
Yeah,
I think he's earned that.
Yeah?
Friend of the
all
podcast,
right.
Scotty.
I'll accept it.
Why hasn't Dave been on the show yet? And Dave, he's referring to, of course, is friend of the show, Dave, who's
A turnip.
yeah, he's come up every now and then.
yeah, Dave. Why?
Come on, Dave.
Dave was actually almost on one of our very early shows. Oh, hold on. That actually reminds me. In our last episode, we forgot to mention that we had just crossed our anniversary.
Oh yeah, right.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
Our first episode released on October 10th, 2018. So, I mean, we're recording this well past that, but I mean, happy belated birthday to us, I guess.
Yay.
Ooh, we can get cake now.
So back to Dave. Yeah, Dave was almost on one of our very early shows, and then he had technical technical mishaps with recording on his end and his computer, so that didn't end up working out. But we definitely have plans to bring him on for his all of his hot takes.
Great hot takes.
That'll probably just be the episode title.
Yep, hot takes.
Yeah, Dave's hot takes is going to be the episode.
Are you guys ready for an
sure.
hour and a half of continuous hot takes? It's gonna be great.
Yeah, he'll tell us all how Kasali Pride Mage should be in every deck that can run it. Whisperwood Elemental and
He's right though.
Hero of Bladehold
Yeah,
and
no,
all
he's
this
just
garbage.
strictly
Yeah.
correct.
It'd be a good
okay,
holiday
so,
episode.
Oh, true. Okay, so now for a more substantial question. This is from Sweet Fancy Moses. How many high-costed cards make it no longer worth it to run a card like Ad Nauseam?
Okay, first I just want to say this is like a great
This is a
question
fantastic
because there's so many things that go into Ad Nauseam decks, and people have this, there's like some people have the myopic focus on low average CMC, and some people focus on certain other aspects, like how much acceleration is in the deck. But there's a lot of factors, and so this is a great excuse to talk about them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I'll just say some things. One is CMC isn't everything. Sometimes you need to consider, average CMC isn't everything. Sometimes you need to consider just pure card quality over things like, oh man, I could be running this. I could be running Gaia's Blessing instead of this second Titan in my Gitrog list. That really cuts my average CMC.
Or I could be on Guy's Blessing instead of Ulamog and Shufflehog. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you're like, wait a second, no, you put some more thought into it, and you realize that, you know what, Ad Nauseam, as your average CMC of your other cards, excluding these massive bombs, is, fairly reasonable. You're still going to draw a bunch of cards, you're still likely going to win the game off of an Ad Nauseam, so you stick with it. And even though you've got these two massive bombs that you've got to, be aware of as you're Ad Nauseam through your deck, it's not a reason to cut Ad Nauseam, or it's not a reason to cut the second Titan, because, most people who are on Double Titan are like, oh, Tainted Pact, Plunge into Darkness, those are two pretty good cards. So, yeah.
Lyndon,
That's just the Gitrog example.
yeah, Lyndon's just using this as a platform to complain about people trying to cut Ad Nauseam from Gitrog.
Yeah, that's always wrong.
But yeah, it is a really great question though about like specifically how many higher costed cards makes it not viable anymore, because honestly there's so much that goes into that decision, and there's a lot of like how you're using Ad Nauseam in the first place in a deck like that, right?
Yeah. So one thing that I think that comes up a lot is like Dark Petition, things like that. Sometimes in budget decks, Dark Petition is like a pretty good card to include, because a lot of the
Am I
times
being put on blast here?
I feel personally attacked. Putting words in
and Dark
Morgan's mouth.
Petition ends up just being like a demonic tutor for a lot of the time in lots of these spell-based decks, and it becomes in like a full budgetless build becomes hard to justify when you've got other options. But in budget, you've got to go to Dark Petition, but then do you cut Ad Nauseam? Does that affect your main plan too much? It's a tough balance a lot of the time, and it's
Okay.
It can easily be swung either way for in some cases.
Dark Petition is not a budget demonic
It is
tutor.
not.
That's not why it's index at all.
I've seen it be used as a budget demonic tutor, not purely budget demonic tutor, but like if you're more expensive tutors like Imperial Seal, Vampiric Tutor, sometimes people can't put that in their budget decks, so they fit in cards in order to maintain tutor density, cards like Dark Petition. And that being a high CMC card can affect your Ad Nauseams. So when you put in more, like, I can go to Gitrog again for an example, and people use Gerard's Orders as a budget, Survival of the Fittest. They use, Final Parting in some decks, and these cards creep up the CMC. So if you all of a sudden you go from your 1 CMC Vampiric Tutor to a Dark Petition, your 2 CMC Survival of the Fittest to 4 CMC Gerard's Orders, and these kinds of changes tend to bring up the average CMC, and then Ad Nauseam becomes more questionable.
Okay. like, yes, you probably shouldn't run Dark Petition as a budget demonic tutor in a random deck, but Dark Petition definitely goes in decks, and it goes in those decks for a reason.
Yes.
I think that your arguments synergize because they're both reasons to like justify the card quality when considering ad nauseum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like, honestly, so I know a lot of people get like sort of freaked out when you have like these big hits in your deck, right? Off of like for Nas. Like you have like an Eldrazi Titan in your deck, or even if you don't have an Eldrazi Titan, you have a Protean Hulk in your deck, and you're just like, not sure if I want to play Adnaz anymore because I have this 7 CMC hit off the top. I think it's still worth it to just like think about how absurd of a card Adnaz is anyway. Like even say like you're Adnazing from 40 life or whatever, and even if you hit your like one of your Titans or a Hulk off the top in like the first 3 cards every single time, like how many cards you're still getting off of a Nas on average? Like even taking that hit to the dome, where like a lot of the time you're still getting another like 10 cards after that, right?
I think also one of the things people tend to focus on overly with Ad Nauseam is they basically just do the math on how deep Ad Nauseam is going to get them. Or like how deep, how safely. Yeah. So having the Titans in the deck maybe means that, you know, you feel a lot of pressure to stop before a Titan will kill you. Or, you know, having a bunch of 5 drops, you're like, okay, well, now I don't want to, you know, if you're running Dark Petition and Force of Will and like Mind's Desire or whatever it is, you're like, okay, maybe I kind of have to stop above there. But how deep you get isn't like ad nauseum for 30 cards doesn't just mean you win the game, depending on what the 30 cards are. So it certainly depends on how well your deck is built to actually win off of the ad nauseum after it resolves. Like, how much mana are you going to have access to, and how likely are you to ad nauseum into more mana? How much mana your actual wins take to execute. Like, I think one of the best ones, the best examples of just an incredible ad nauseum deck that's like super consistent is Food Chain, because it's
all
you
mana.
Need so little mana. You have to get Food Chain into play, basically. And then if you have a creature, you're done. Or if you don't have a creature, you have to get one creature into play, like a mana dork.
Yeah.
And
you just need like 4 mana total to do an Adnaz, like win post Adnaz.
And the deck runs, you know, all the good fast mana and rituals. So, you know, that's a deck where, like, even if you, I mean, it does have an incredibly low average CMC, and the only high cost cards are, like, you have Force of Will, Ad Nauseam, and then you have Mist Hollow Griffin at 4, and then you're done. But, like, let's pretend your Food Chain deck had an Ulamog in it, like, I don't know, you're playing Corvold or something. It doesn't matter, because you still have very high chances of winning off of ad nauseams, even for lower life totals, or even with a slightly higher average. So it's an important thing to consider.
Yeah, I definitely think it's less of a, like, I have these high CMC cards in my deck, so that means I can't play ad nause, and more of a, while I might have these high CMC cards in my deck that, like, make my ad nause worse sometimes, but also maybe my deck's not fully built to take advantage of a smaller ad nause. And that makes it worse.
Ad nauseam is such a powerful card that you can almost build like a little, I mean, this is over reductive in terms of like how complex the decision making process is in terms of ad nause, but you can kind of make a little 2x2 matrix of, you know, is my deck low CMC and how well does it win off of an ad nause? Like, how much mana do you need to win? Because you can run ad nause as just a value draw spell if you've got a low CMC deck. And then even if you've got, you know, high average CMC bombs, like Morgan was saying, it's still just worth it to run a lot of the time because you've got mana to take advantage of it and you can win like that. However, if you fall in that like little tiny quadrant where you've got high CMC and you don't take advantage of it well due to like low fast mana, probably not worth it. So I think a good counterexample in that spot is I don't run Ad Nauseam in my Anafenza deck because you've got bombs like Elish Norn, Razaketh, generally just higher CMC. With like you've got like 4 drops like Linvala and whatnot. So that makes it harder. You've got that higher average CMC, and then also you don't have high amounts of fast mana to profit off of, right? You've got things like LED for combo purposes, but if you're playing like a Null Rod style deck, you're not gonna have things like Mana Vault, Grim Monolith, Lotus Petals, like those kinds of cheap cards that are going to really enable you to close out the game after an Ad Nauseam. So I can just draw cards and be stuck with a Razaketh in my hand and be like, yeah, crap, I need to find a way to discard this, and I need to reanimate it. I can't use reanimate because that's going to, cost me even more of my life if I've just taken a bunch off of Ad Nauseam. Razaketh takes life already, so that's costing you more mana. Like you're going to use an Animate Dead instead. And these kinds of things add up and kind of make it harder to justify running an Ad Nauseam.
Yeah, how much life total pressure your deck, or how much pressure your deck puts on your life total is another thing that is often important to consider.
Yep, definitely.
When looking at your, like, if you just keep jamming in all these things and like you have a really painful mana base and then oftentimes by the time you actually get around to casting Ad Nauseam, you're at like 30 life, and then and that can still very often win you the game, but
like maybe you're
not.
You have like a lot of pain in your mana base, and you're also not particularly taking it, like putting cards in that make the Ad Naus better. So you're just like, yeah, well, I got a low count off of it, but also a lot of the stuff that hit off of this Ad Naus wasn't exactly high quality Naus hits. So,
all right, I've got a revision to the question. How many higher costed cards make it no longer worth it to cast Narset's Reversal on an Ad Nauseam?
Well, I have, I once copied an Ad Nauseam when I was still playing a bunch of turn spells in my Kest deck, and it didn't go super well.
Love it.
Yeah, I was like, okay, cast it. Walk the Aeon's Time Stretch. I was like, well, I think we're going to stop there.
You know what, honestly, I think I'm probably greedy enough that I would Narset's Reversal and Ad Naus if I was on Narset.
Absolutely.
Narset. I mean, that just feels like a flavor.
I think I'd probably still go for it, because just you gotta greed so much. I mean, like, yes, you have all of this expensive stuff in your deck, and you're probably gonna die after 2 hits, but I mean, the rest of your deck's just all fast mana, right? So you just gotta go for it.
Sometimes I'll also note is that people get too greedy with their Ad Nauseams if they're not going to close out the game. Like I've seen people who get to, let's say, 15 life, and they're like, oh, I'm still probably like 2 cards, or I need to hit a Mana Crypt exactly to close out the game here, or they just don't feel like it'd be, in a comfortable position with enough protection. So they probably should stop and just use it cut it off as a value Ad Nauseam, but they'll keep digging until they get to, like 7 life, 5 life, and then they'll call it quits, and they won't be able to win the game until their next turn, and then people will just be
they
like,
get beat to
okay,
death.
yeah, beat to death. So,
but
that's something you need to consider.
I will say though that killing yourself with an Ad Nauseam is not always wrong.
Oh yeah,
like there are definitely times where if you've gone sufficiently deep on your Ad Nauseam, and it's like, I can't win, and I'm not gonna live another turn, then you can either stop there and say I can't win, or you can try and get lucky, and if you get lucky you win, and if you don't get lucky you die, but you were gonna die anyways. So certainly, like, figure, some people sometimes don't stop early enough, but they also do sometimes stop too early.
Yeah,
like if you've committed,
if you pass
commit
past the point of no return. But I also think that that's kind of to my point a bit, which is you probably shouldn't be going to that point where you have to continue to dig for your out. I mean,
it's hard to.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, if you're at 15 life and you went like, I just need 1 more mana. Like, that seems pretty reasonable in a lot of decks. If you're like, okay, any of the Moxen, Soul Ring, Vault, Crypt, maybe something like Dockside or Dark Ritual, and then it's just like, you're just flipping, and then you hit like 2-drop, 3-drop Force of Will, and you're like, well, that's not ideal.
And but at that point, you do have to keep going to try and win because you're just gonna die from beats. Yep, that's definitely a mistake I see often too. Anyone else want to chime in on this question before I wrap it up?
I think we're good.
I think we're good.
Okay, well, that's it for this episode. If you guys would like to reach out to us with any questions, comments, or concerns, you can contact us on Twitter at IntoTheNorthPod, via our email at IntoTheNorthPodcast@gmail.com, or on our Discord server, the invite link for which can be found in the description for this episode. An extra special thanks to all of our patrons who help cover the costs and expenses for our show and allow us to work towards improving the quality of the podcast. If you too would like to become a Patreon, we are at patreon.com/IntoTheNorthPodcast. Thank you as always to the band Vox Cadre for our lovely podcast music, to Nate Slover for our equally lovely podcast logo, and to our long-suffering podcast editor, Roadkill. Next episode will be out in 2 weeks. Until then, see ya.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.